Hello, my name's Craig Barton, and welcome to a series of videos designed to help you make the most out of my website, diagnosticquestions.com. Now, in this particular video, we're going to take a quick look at the pedagogy behind diagnostic questions, because one of the questions I get asked the most as a teacher is when am I best using these questions, and also how do I respond to my students' answers. So I've put together a little section here on the website. If you go to About and you click on What are Diagnostic Questions, you get taken to this page where it gives you a little text summary of all the main points about the pedagogy. So the first thing to do, I guess, is just to talk about what makes questions diagnostic questions. And it's a very, very simple concept. It's a multiple choice question where one of the answers is right and three of the answers are wrong, but crucially, each of the incorrect answers reveals a key misconception that students may have. So this is one of the first diagnostic questions that I ever wrote, in fact, with one of my trainee teachers. And it was designed for a Year 7 lesson where the teacher was about to go on to study compound area, but first wanted to assess students' knowledge of whether they could work out the area of rectangles. So together we wrote this question. Now just take a look at that, and if you fancy pausing the video for a second and just try to think, firstly, what's the right answer, but more importantly, why have each of the incorrect answers been chosen? So, if my maths is right, B is the right answer, 10 times 7 is 70. If students answer A, that reveals a key misconception that they have, that they think that instead of timesing the numbers together, they add the numbers together. C is an interesting one. 34 could suggest that students are muddling up area with perimeter, and that's a very different misconception that the students who answered A have. And D, I absolutely love D. My trainee teacher suggested we go for this one, and I said they'll never answer that in a million years. But of course they did. And the reason students gave for that was that they were muddling up the area of a rectangle with the area of a triangle. They were obsessed. They've been told so many times that you have to divide by 2 for area of a triangle that they were dividing everything by 2. So doing 10 times 7 and dividing by 2. So that's a diagnostic question. You ask it, you're collecting your students' responses, and crucially, before your students have uttered a word, you're already learning from their responses. So, in class, how can you actually use it? Well, obviously, you can use the website with technology. So use students answering on their mobile phones or their tablets. And the benefit of that is you get the questions automatically marked for you. But even more importantly, you can read your students' explanations that they give. Because every time they answer a question, if I just go up to this one, they're prompted to give an explanation why, to give you a greater insight into their thinking. Or nothing wrong with doing it without technology. For many years I've used these with mini whiteboards, ABCD cards, or simply fingers, 1 vote for A, 2 for B, 3 for C, and so on. And we've provided some large and small voting cards if you want to print those out to use those without technology. But when should you actually use diagnostic questions in the classroom? And this is quite an interesting one. For me, I think there's 3 different times to use them, and they each serve a different purpose. At the start of a lesson is very important to assess baseline knowledge. If I'm about to teach a lesson on trigonometry, there's no point me carrying on unless my students know which side is the opposite, which is the adjacent, and which is the hypotenuse. So I might ask a question like this at the start of the lesson so I can check the baseline knowledge is all in place before I go on and teach the new knowledge of actually how to work out lengths of sides and angles using trigonometry. Or I might use a diagnostic question in the middle of the lesson. So for example, say I've been teaching a lesson on sketching quadratic graphs using factorising or using features of the graph. And all the students are working away at different speeds on different tasks. But I want a quick snapshot of their current level of understanding. So I might stop the class and project this question up on the board or send it to their mobile phones or tablets or whatever. Or I might use a diagnostic question at the end of a lesson, just to get a picture of the progress that my students have made throughout that lesson and inform my future teaching. So I might have been teaching a lesson on probability, and I'll just bang this question up at the board at the end, get in all the responses, and that will inform how I'm going to approach the next lesson and the series of lessons that follow that. Of course, diagnostic questions can be used at home. So using the website completely for free, you can put together a quiz, assign it to your students, and collect in all their answers and their reasons. So this is a quiz on fractions, decimals, and percent conversions that your students can start, and you can get in all their responses. What's very, very important is actually responding correctly to the student's answers. Because it's all well and good asking a question and getting in all that response and explanations, but what do you actually do with it as a teacher? So what I've tried to do here is think of as many different scenarios as I've actually encountered myself in the classroom, and just give a few thoughts and share a few strategies that I've found reasonably successful. So there's lots of things that can happen. Everyone gets the answer correct, most get it correct, but a few students have got it wrong. There's a complete mixture of responses, most get it wrong and a few get it right and all get it wrong. So just pop on the page and have a read through those, and if you come up with any extra strategies, just drop me an email and I'll add those into the mix as well. It's also important to think what makes a good diagnostic question, because these are not just simply multiple choice questions where one answer is right and three answers are wrong. Hopefully they're a bit more subtle than that. So I've put here an example of a question that I don't think is a particularly good diagnostic question. Which of these is a multiple of 6? And again, you might want to pause the video at this point and think, why is that not actually the best question in the world? And for me, the reason this is not the best question in the world, mainly, is because there's no factors on there. And I find that's the biggest misconception students have with factors and multiples, and that's mistaking factors for multiples. So students may well stumble upon the right answer of 24 here without actually being able to demonstrate that they don't have that misconception of mistaking factors with multiples. For me, this is a much better question. Which of these is a multiple of 9? There's some factors chucked in there, there's 69 chucked in there, just in case students think that multiples end with the same number, and so on. What are the benefits of teachers writing questions together? For me, they are absolutely huge. I've often been often had the belief that teachers planning lessons together isn't necessarily the best idea I've ever seen, because teachers plan completely different lessons to each other, dependent on their teaching style, the relationship with the class, the time of day, all that kind of thing. And I've often tried to joint plan with teachers, and we spend half the time arguing over the different fonts and animations and all that kind of stuff. The bottom line is good lessons aren't necessarily good lessons for everybody. They're not perfectly transferable between teachers, but good questions are. A good question for one teacher is a good question for every teacher. And I found it incredibly useful getting our department together and actually sitting down and writing questions together, because it's a great way of discussing misconceptions that students have, and it's a brilliant way of teachers sharing their past experiences with each other in a non-kind of intrusive or threatening way. So I wholeheartedly recommend in departmental meetings setting aside a little bit of time to think what topics are coming up next for you to teach, and actually teachers getting together in pairs and writing questions together, swapping them around with other teachers, seeing if you can improve on them, and so on. And increasingly, I've found huge benefits of students writing questions. I've got some incredibly bright students in some of my classes, and when they've absolutely nailed a concept, instead of giving them some traditional extension work, I like to say, write me a diagnostic question based upon that. Because just think about the skills involved in needing to write a question. First, they've got to show that they know how to understand the topic and get the question right. Then they've got to be able to come up with suitable wrong answers, and then they've got to be able to explain those misconceptions. I've taken some screenshots of some diagnostic questions that some of my students have written in their books, and they're absolutely wonderful questions. And of course, there's nothing stopping them uploading them to the website themselves. So there's a quick overview of the kind of pedagogy behind diagnostic questions. What I also do each week is I select a question and I just analyse it in depth on a blog. And if you just go to the dashboard, you'll see it there, question of the week. And if you click on blog, you'll get that one. So for example, one here is negative numbers and fractions. So I've chosen a question and I just pick out the kind of key data on it. That one's been answered correctly 73% of the time. And then I actually analyse some of the explanations that have been given on the website by real life students, just to give us an insight into how students think about that particular topic. And then I share quizzes that particular question belongs to. So there's an overview of the pedagogy behind diagnostic questions. And if that's kind of hooked you in and you want to start using them, as I hope it has, if you just go to the About section and you go to the how-to videos, you'll find guides on how to use all the features that are available on the website. Take care and bye for now.